My name is Jeff Shalau and I work for the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension in Yavapai County. We're talking about fruit tree pruning today, and I'm going to demonstrate some different techniques that we would use to prune deciduous fruit trees. But before we do that, something about the place where we are. We're in Chino Valley, Arizona, and that's at about 5,000 feet elevation. It's an excellent area to grow deciduous fruit trees, but it has its challenges, of which we'll talk about some today. This is an apple tree that has a modified central leader, and it was headed at one period in time way up here, and so it's got scaffold branches coming off of it, and then it doesn't have a pure central leader that goes straight to the sky. It's a modified central leader with scaffold branches arising from various places along it. This is the traditional way of pruning an apple tree. For backyard gardeners, I often recommend that they just prune apple trees to an open center as well. This particular cooperator wanted taller trees because horses are turned out here once in a while, and getting up above the horses was one of the goals. Also, with this tree, I probably made 10 or 12 pruning cuts on it of very small diameter material, and I think it's almost ready to go, which means it's ready for the next year of growth. And it really doesn't take a whole lot of work with apples and pears if you can stay ahead of the pruning by doing it every year and even looking at it during the summer to make sure you don't have any breaks, removing water sprouts, and just looking for any potential problems. Apples and pears produce their fruit mostly on spurs. Most varieties do. And here we've got some younger spurs that are just coming into production. And then as we look down lower on this tree, we'll see some older spurs, and some of these spurs are probably getting beyond their productive potential. This is the winesap apple that we're working on again here, and you can see the fruiting spurs up and down the branches here. So this is where the blossom cluster will appear, and there will be 5 blossoms there. The center one is what we call the king bloom, and that's generally what's going to make the biggest piece of fruit. The other thing that's worth mentioning along the way here is if we do set a fruit crop, it is critically important to thin that fruit for about 4 to 6 inches apart per piece. And it's hard to do, but you need to tell yourself to do it. And I'll tell you right now, you probably won't do enough of it. And then you'll learn that there's a certain amount of fruit tree pruning and thinning that you need to accomplish. Actually, the thinning of the fruit is very, very important. I'm going to be pruning water sprouts out of this tree first, and to reiterate, water sprouts really are sapping energy out of the tree. So one of the first things I like to do is take the easiest cuts and take the water sprouts out. So you can recognize them often because they'll have like a bloom on them, and if you rub them they get shiny. So I'm going to take out those water sprouts. There's a real inwardly growing one there, and I think I'll take that one and that one, and I'm going to get rid of this. So I have a branch out here that actually is in a spot of the tree where we might want to have a branch, and I talked about heading cuts previously. Well, if we want these branches here to start branching out and getting more lateral growth, we could head this right here. I'm heading it right above a bud that's pointing outward, but I would fully expect 3 or 4 of the buds below that to break. So we'll see what happens with that next year, and we'll work on it accordingly, doing what we need to. Over here I'm going to do something similar. The top bud is facing outward to me, and then those 2 heading cuts are probably the only 2 heading cuts that you'll see me make in this tree. Crossing branches are another problem that we want to look for, and on this crossing branch here you can already see some injury starting to occur. In the case of this branch, I'll just thin it out and remove the entire branch, because there's lots of branches right here. Here we have a water sprout, and this one is kind of headed into an empty spot of the tree, so I think I'll leave that one. But then we have another one that is starting to rub and get in the way that we don't need. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that one out as well. So just looking at your water sprouts, you'll probably remove 90% of them, but you probably will leave a few if your tree needs some more density to it. This area of the tree is a little congested in here. In general, with an apple tree, what I'll say is if you can throw a football through the crown of the tree, not that you would want to actually do this, but if it would make it through without getting stuck, the tree is probably the right density. And down here, that football just would not get through there. So I'm just looking at what I've got to work with here. I'm going to take that out, and then this downwardly growing branch, and alleviate some of that congestion. These are still water sprouts. They're kind of downwardly growing. They definitely need to go, so we'll take them out. And as you can see here, there was a bunch of pruning cuts. So these water sprouts were kind of a response to those pruning cuts, and I would expect that we'll get some more water sprouts over time. But as time goes on, we'll get less and less. Sitting here in the center of this tree, and I'm going to describe something that a lot of people do to try and make their apple trees smaller. And what they do is they give the tree a uniform haircut across the top. Not that that's what happened here, but there was a lot of work that went on at this point right here, and you can see all the water sprouts that took off from that point. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that leader back down to a thinning point down below, and we're going to cut it right here. I will demonstrate the 3-cut pruning method on this branch here, and this will take the top out of this tree. What I'll do is I'll make an undercut, and I'll try and go through at least halfway, but not allow the saw to get bound in there. So it came out nice and easily. Now I'm going to move about an inch or so up the stem. What the undercut did is it's going to prevent the bark from stripping and making a wound that goes further than it needs to down the tree. And the overcut now is going to allow me to remove all of the weight from that branch, except for the little stump that was left behind. So, as easy as that. Oh, there we go. And the third cut will go right here. When you get to the end, go very slowly. You got a nice clean cut. So you can see this pruning wound where we removed the central leader of this out of this winesap apple tree. And you would think that a large open wound like that would be a bad thing for a plant, and you may also think that you should cover it with some sort of wound sealer or pruning paint. But that is the wrong thing to do. When you cover a wound like this with some sort of waterproof sealant, really what you're doing is sealing in moisture and potential disease organisms and creating an environment where those disease organisms will probably do very well. So no pruning paint. You may be wondering about this white paint on the trunks, and the cooperator that we're working with here has done that to prevent sun scald on the trees. By buying the least expensive interior or exterior latex paint that you can find and mixing it 50-50 with water, you can make a very inexpensive trunk painting paint that will reflect the sun.